As this season is going along, it's become increasingly obvious how not obvious who should win MVP this year is, and there's been a little bit of a push lately to get one particular candidate in place, and that is Jayson Tatum. And not gonna lie, man, I just do not see it. Hello everybody, welcome to Oscar Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about this MVP situation. I'm also going to be talking about the Golden State Warriors and Celtics game where the Celtics blew them out by 50 points. LeBron dropping 40K, which is obviously huge. I mean, he didn't drop 40K, but he reached 40K. Dropping 40K would be pretty substantial, I'd say. That, and then we're going to go down kind of a rapid fire, a bunch of different smaller topics that have kind of been put on the back burner and are slowly aging away. So I'm just kind of going to put my quick 2 cents in for a couple of smaller things. So yeah, with that said, I guess let's first talk about this Warriors versus Celtics game, which was a 52-point loss. It was also the third 50-point win that the Boston Celtics have had this season. And really, there's not too much to say about the game specifically. The Warriors just got absolutely dicked down by Boston. That's just the reality of the situation. I do want to say this about the Golden State Warriors from the jump. I haven't really covered their recent success. I just, not intentionally by any means, it's just how the cookie has crumbled, I suppose. I haven't talked about the Warriors' recent success, so I do want to point that out, that is a thing. They have been winning quite a bit more lately. Unfortunately, it hasn't really moved their place in the standings because the Western Conference is hell. You know, Golden State's been better as of late, so I don't want to just hop in here and immediately dunk on them and that be the first thing I say about them in forever and like just give a false pretense of the actual reality of the season the Warriors are having. Still been a rough season, no doubt about it. And this game definitely didn't make things feel any better, but I also felt like people were overreacting a little bit and doing exactly what I'm talking about, which is just ignoring all context of the Warriors' recent success because we have this thing that we found to clown on this team. And that's the way that NBA Twitter discourse tends to go, is rather than actually analyzing or understanding the context of these basketball teams, it's just like, who's done something that I can make fun of most recently, and how can I frame all of my actual basketball discussion around just memes and jokes and not actual discussion. That aside, obviously a very bad game for the Warriors. Really the big catalyst in this was Stephen Curry had an absolute dog shit performance. I naturally saw a bunch of people saying like, if 23 had this box score, the world would be on fire or whatever the hell, which is never a way of, you know, not a type of basketball argument that I like to have. I don't like the framework or the suggestion of like, this player is criticized more than this player. You know what the problem is? That second player isn't criticized more. When in reality, I think we are way too harsh and criticize these athletes way too much to a degree that can get to an inhuman levels at times, especially with a lot of the more extreme sections of NBA fans. I don't agree with that argument. I think great players have bad games sometimes. Good players have them more often. And Stephen Curry is an all-time great player. He had a bad game. It is what it is. The thing that was a little bit funny about it is I saw some Celtics fans on Twitter like proclaiming this as like revenge for the 2022 finals. I don't know how to tell you this, dog. You could have beat the Warriors by 150 and it still doesn't make up for losing a championship. You know, they still have the edge on you there. That's just the reality of the situation. But yeah, moving on past that, I want to talk about Jayson Tatum. So obviously the Boston Celtics are excellent. They are easily the best team in the Eastern Conference. As much as I still have skepticism towards Boston just because of their history of just always falling a little bit short. Aside from that skepticism, I do at the very least think a finals appearance is almost, you can never say anything certain in the NBA, but it's very likely that Boston is going to be representing the Eastern Conference in the finals this year, and that's all good. So all that praise to them. There has been some discussion about what it actually would look like for this team if they did lose, given how stacked the roster is, given how dominant they have been in the conference. I believe they're on a 65 win pace, which is excellent, obviously. The Celtics are really good. They're the best team in the NBA, or at the very least the best team in the Eastern Conference. and they have a really impressive record. And of course, Jayson Tatum is one of the best players in the NBA. He's a top 10 guy. So naturally, if you have a top 10 guy and you have a really dominant team, MVP discussions are going to be had. Your name is going to be thrown into the ring, and that is entirely understandable. But there was specifically a push this last February. If we were following the narrative where it leads rather than fabricating it or molding it to be perceived a certain way, basically what I'm getting at, Luka Doncic had a ridiculous February and Jayson Tatum didn't. Jayson Tatum had a standard Jayson Tatum month, and the Celtics continued to win. Meanwhile, Luka Doncic had a ridiculous month. I don't know if player of the month hasn't been announced. I don't remember. I don't know. But I think there was a lot of discussion about him winning player of the month, as much discussion as there can be about player of the month, because people don't really care about that shit all that much. Luka, ridiculous February. Going into February, the NBA's official MVP ladder had Luka Doncic over Jayson Tatum. And then after this month, again, Luka great month, Tatum average month. Luka went down a spot in the MVP ladder under Jayson Tatum. Also, mind you, the Mavericks have been winning in this month. They have had a much better streak lately ever since the trade deadline. In spite of all that, Luka moves down the MVP ladder because there was a lot of discussion from different media outlets about Jayson Tatum winning MVP. Now, the Boston media machine is no stranger to this, so that wasn't necessarily new. But there were guys like, I think Stephen A. Smith specifically was really pushing the idea, and I think Kendrick Perkins as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I saw that Stephen A. Smith made some argument of like, the Celtics are the best team in the NBA. Jayson Tatum's averaging 27 points per game. And I'm just like, dude, it's 2024. 27 points per game isn't that crazy. Like, doesn't Tyrese Maxey average 27 points per game? No offense to Tyrese Maxey, but we're not talking about him in MVP conversations. Not saying that 27 isn't enough of a point threshold, you know? But when we're talking about the MVP discussion, and we have a guy in there who's averaging 34 points per game, you can leave your 27. Like, Donovan Mitchell's averaging 28. Giannis is averaging 31. SGA is averaging 31. There are a good handful of other players averaging 27 plus points per game. As of right now, Jayson Tatum is 9th in the NBA in scoring, okay? De'Aaron Fox is right behind him at 10, just 0.2 points per game less. So I don't quite understand how his box score is going to compete in this race, because just about every other candidate has a more impressive box score. And then you factor in what is super important in this discussion, what valuable really means. Now, I'm not going to harp on this too much because, spoiler alert, the next main channel video is actually going to be discussing the MVP and what it is historically, what the precedents of the award are, how those precedents have changed over the past few years, kind of what the future of the award is, and I'm gonna make my pick for MVP on the year at the end of the video. Since I don't want to harp on the details of it too much, but I can say this at the very least, and this will be a section of the video, so you're getting a preview here. Value, in terms of the name most valuable player, the only thing that is up for debate, and the thing that is constantly debated every year with the MVP, is what valuable actually means. They're definitely a player, and they're often going to be the most. That's really not debatable. But value is debatable. However, one area at the very least, historically speaking, we tend to give these MVPs to players who are perceived to have an overall super significant relevance on the success of their team. And that's not to say that Jayson Tatum doesn't have a super relevant place in the success of the team, because he is the best player on this team. And the Celtics are, again, the best team in the NBA, so obviously he has a significant impact. I don't mean to suggest otherwise. However, if you look at the construction of the roster and you look at the differences between the Mavericks without Luka Doncic and the Celtics without Jayson Tatum, not even a contest. It's also not really a contest when we're talking about the likes of Nikola Jokic, Giannis, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Boston Celtics are a +8 without Jayson Tatum. A +8. They're one of the best teams in the league without Jayson. Meanwhile, Luka, they're a very net negative without him. They've been better this year than they have been in the past. Obviously, a big part of that is Kyrie Irving, but at the very least, there is a huge disparity between the success of these teams when they have their star player versus when they don't. Now, a lot of this discourse, a lot of the Tatum narrative being pushed resulted in NBA Twitter discourse, a dangerous thing. And the format of this discussion is, of course, memes, because NBA Twitter is the way that it is. And there's this new format that was created of like Jayson Tatum stats, and then it's like, if Luka put up these stats, his averages would go down. And then that format changed to people talking about how good the Celtics are without Jayson Tatum. And like there was a stat line for Tyrese Halliburton, who had a bad game. I think he had like 4 points. They were quoted that with, if Jayson Tatum had this performance, his team still would have won. So there's a discussion of like the privilege of your teammates and your help and all that. And I do want to acknowledge that there is definitely a discussion to be had about the construction of Dallas's roster and how that almost benefits Luka in this discussion, but not in the actual success the Mavericks could have. And if we're just gauging this based on what's good for winning basketball, then perhaps this is more of a warped narrative. You know, yeah, there is a heliocentrism to Luka's game that hinders the Mavericks, but also promotes his MVP case. So that is true, but I also think that's more or less indicative as well of the skill set, that difference that exists between these players, because I don't think that Tatum could do anything close to what Luka does. Meanwhile, I think Luka could very much do what Tatum does, and then some more. As for the discussion between these two, who's the better player, I don't think it's a contest. I don't think it's a contest at all who is the better player between these two. I think it's kind of ridiculous that that has become a conversation. First thing I'm going to say in that regard is that Luka Doncic is a fine defender. So there's that. Not as good of a defender as Tatum is. Something I say about Jayson Tatum pretty regularly is that he's an underrated defensive player. He is consistently underrated as a defender. I think he probably should be an all-defensive guy at some point in his career, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's happened yet. Yeah, Jayson Tatum's a much better defender than Luka, but, and I don't know, I guess is a hot take in terms of basketball philosophy, but especially in a modern context, in the modern NBA, I want Luka over Tatum every single day because of the difference of being a generational playmaker. Generational playmaking from my lead franchise option, that is more valuable than defense, especially in a modern NBA context. Like, I'd rather just have other players on the team play the defense, and then I can have my lead guy be both a ridiculous scorer and a ridiculous playmaker, as Luka Doncic is. Between the two, Luka's a better scorer. So, yeah, Luka's easily a better player. I also think he has a better MVP case. I understand the difference in seeding, but at least the way the MVP discussion has been the last couple of years, seeding has become less and less relevant. Understanding how dominant the Western Conference is another factor here. I don't think either of these guys are going to win the MVP, but I specifically framed this around Luka and Tatum because that's kind of the area of the narrative based on this last month and how the MVP ladder shift was like just complete bullshit. Jayson Tatum is not MVP. This push, whether it's from his camp or the media or otherwise, I hate when this happens, truly, because it makes me question the priorities of the players. I'm just not with it. I really am not. Moving on from that, I want to highlight the 40,000 point mark that LeBron got. There's not a whole lot to argue about or discuss. You know, he drove and got a layup, and that got him to 40,000 points. I do specifically like that bucket that got him that 40K mark was a driving layup. I believe his shot to pass Kareem was like a mid-range fadeaway from the left elbow, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's a fairly signature shot in LeBron's career, so I'm not like upset with it. But I definitely thought it's more thematically appropriate that it be a drive. Just for LeBron's career, like that is the foundational skill set in which he built his GOAT status, his at the very least being in the conversation, right? And he did that by being a freight train going to the basket, and then on the off chance you did bring enough defense to stop him from getting to the rim, he is a generational playmaking talent who will make the right pass every single time. But that drive, ability to just go downhill, that's what got him to 40,000 points. All the jump shots he hit on the way were just complimentary to overall his ability. Fuck off, stupid phone. Yeah, I'm glad it was a layup is the point that I'm getting at. I also just want to discuss like the GOAT thing real quick, just a little check-in on that. You know, I don't think this changes anything because we knew this was going to happen. But, you know, I saw that LeBron has 40,000 points, 11,000 rebounds, and 10,000 assists in his career. Dude has a 40-point triple-double of career cumulative stats. That's pretty fucking ridiculous. And it's something I've said quite a bit about the GOAT debate. I don't know if LeBron's going to add too much more to his trophy case from this point in his career. Probably a few more all-star appearances, maybe an all-NBA here or there, but probably no MVPs or scoring titles or championships. More likely than not, maybe he gets in at the buzzer with some other team because it doesn't seem like it's going to happen with the Lakers. Regardless, I've always said that LeBron can kind of win the conversation by default just because he has such ridiculous numbers. The conversation of who did more in less amount of time, it's not really a conversation. It's Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan did the most with a 13-year stretch. We're not counting the last 2 years. There's no 13-year stretch in LeBron's career that's as impressive as that stretch from rookie MJ to last year as a Bull MJ. Just a ridiculous career in such a short amount of time. But LeBron gonna be here for what, 24 seasons? You know, how much longer does he go? Who knows? He might retire with 45,000 points. I don't know, just saying. It's kind of hard to argue against, you know, if the guy plays twice as much as Michael Jordan does, you know what I mean? Like, holy shit. We're going to rapid fire a few topics here. So, Chet versus Wemby. Wemby got the best out of Chet, blocking the clutch shot late, hitting some big three-pointers. Got a couple of assists as well, as I believe in the fourth quarter. Just a very excellent, dominant performance from Victor Wembanyama. I think the Rookie of the Year debate was short-lived. As soon as the Spurs started figuring out how to use Wemby more, as soon as he started to get a little bit more minutes, and then he just started putting up ridiculous numbers in such short stretches, it became pretty obvious who's going to win Rookie of the Year. And, you know, Chet put up a valiant effort, no doubt. The fact that it was a conversation for as long as it was is really impressive because Wemby's ridiculous, man. I don't know how many times I can say it. I'm watching this guy, and I'm like, if he has a healthy career, he's going to be, at the very least, a top 5 player of all time. I really think just continuing to go the direction he's going with health permitting, let's say he has an 18-year career, he's going to be in that conversation, if not leading it. Like, this guy was built in a lab to be the GOAT. Victor also became the first rookie in NBA history to record 5 three-pointers and 5 blocks in the same game. So there's that. The Hornets held to a season-low 26 points in the first half against the Bucks. This is another instance where I actually kind of want to highlight the positive of the Charlotte Hornets recently because they have actually been pretty good, which is weird to say about the Charlotte Hornets. And the deadline that they had, I think they made a lot of interesting moves, and they got some young guys to be excited about. Trey Mann has been pretty good for them, for example. Grant Williams has been weirdly really good for them. But yeah, 26 points at half. Holy shit, dude. Holy shit, 26 points at half. That's a crazy stat. Another thing to say there for the Bucks is how good the Bucks defense has been lately. You know, the wins have been a little hit or miss, but the Bucks defense has looked better under Doc Rivers. You do got to give him that. Part of it's just correcting a lot of very stupid not personnel decisions, but like scheme decisions from Adrian Griffin. A lot of questionable scheme decisions. Jaren Jackson Jr. scored his 29th point with 4.5 minutes left in the third quarter with Memphis up by 11. From there, Anthony Edwards switched on to Jaren Jackson Jr., and he finished the game going 1 for 6 with 4 points. Ant, doing that on defense, also managed to finish the game going 7 for 11 with 19 points with a plus 21. Just utter dominance from Anthony Edwards straight up, and I remember he also had a ridiculous February, since I mentioned that with Luka earlier. Like 30 plus points per game. really, his defense has become so good. Anthony Edwards is just awesome. Nothing more to say. NBA investigating whether offense needs to be throttled. There is apparently some campaign for offense to be addressed going into this next season. I think it was like the NBA Board of Competitiveness or something like that. Sixers hope that Joel Embiid can return in late March. That will be interesting to see. They just got a win over the Dallas Mavericks despite no Embiid. Yeah, I'm really curious what that's going to look like, how competitive the Sixers are going to ultimately end up being in the playoffs just because of how late they're going to be acclimating back to Joel Embiid being back. Maybe he picks it up and they're right back in stride. I do think that's plausible. Depends how quickly he recovers. What the fuck? Alright, well my fire alarm is going off, so I'm gonna sign off now.